I've watched more than 3 hours worth of video and more than 20 reviews of different YouTubers and videographers, and here is what I've learned about new Sony a7s III. All the nuances are right there, so keep on watching. This is Oleg Nikitin and no limits on in my tech kitchen. Let's go, guys. First, let's talk about the price. In the US it will be $3,500 and in the Europe it will be a little bit more pricey, but I guess it's a pretty adequate price for this beast of a machine. And now the main issue everyone is talking about, and this is overheating. 90% of reviews says, including Philip Bloom, DP Review, Mehdi Hapoya, Potato Jet, Tony Northrup and Gerald Undone, they all say that camera doesn't overheat in 4K 60 10-bit 422, and it overheats in 4K 20 after approximately an hour. And Philip Bloom also said that after 2 minutes of having a rest after overheating, the camera was capable of recording 20 more minutes in 4K 120 422 10-bit. The only guy that said that Sony overheated was Dan Watson, and he was doing his test in Florida in the direct sunlight against Canon R5, and Sony lasted for about 27 minutes and then overheated. Also, Dan Watson said that in the real-world shooting scenario it didn't overheat and didn't even warn him that it's going to overheat. So in the real-world scenario it's almost, okay. I can definitely say that in 90% of using scenarios it won't overheat, and I cannot even imagine the situation when you need to shoot a 124K 10-bit 422 for more than an hour. Who needs that? And now about the sensor. I got a comment that 12 megapixel sensor in 2020 is a pretty bad way. I'm not agree with this at all. First of all, we have to understand that 12 megapixel sensor has pixel-to-pixel readout in 4K without pixel binning and light skipping, and very big pixels, almost 4 times bigger than in Canon R5, for instance. So it's much better performance and much less pressure on the processor. Speaking of processors, now we have two processors, Bions XR, which are 8 times more powerful than in the previous generation of Sony a7s, a7s II, and they are that powerful that they can record simultaneously to 2 SD cards in full resolution, full bit depth, 4K 120 422 simultaneously, and give to a recorder the raw signal in 16-bit without dimming the screen, and everything at the same time. Also, because of the more powerful processors, now we have much less rolling shutter. Philip Bloom and Gerald Undone said that it's now almost negligible, and you can really not see it without whip panning as crazy on the long range focal length. So right now I'm able to say that the rolling shutter is not an issue anymore, at least for 90% of shooting scenarios. And also Philip Bloom said that the micro jitter is almost eliminated. The picture quality and color. Simply find the new Philip Bloom's video Now I See Part 2 on Vimeo and download it in the original resolution, and you can tell by yourself about the picture quality. Actually, I was pretty stunned. 4K 120 looks amazing, and the colors look really good. Also, I'd like to mention that these are colors by Philip Bloom, so he was editing the colors a lot, but I guess you'll understand how much you can push and pull from this camera. All the reviewers said that the color right now and the color science in this model is much better than in the previous generations of all Sony cameras. And also I'd like to mention that it's not as cinetone as in FX9 and the Venice series, but it's very close. Philip Bloom says that this camera is a perfect B camera to his FX9. Also Potato Jet said the same. So right now the color science is as close to the cinema world as possible.
This is the first time that I think Sony's color science is better than Canon's color science. That's kind of a hard pill to swallow.
And now about FullHD to 40 frames a second. Everybody says, including Mehdi Hapoya, Potato Jet and DP Review guys, that this FullHD footage is very good. And it's sharp and crisp, and it's pretty usable. So 240 is now an option. And now about the dynamic range. The best dynamic range I've seen was from Gerald Undone, and he said that it's around 13 usable stops of dynamic range, which is 2 stops more than the Canon's C-Log. And also everybody said that the dynamic range is the best at 640 ISO in S-Log3 S-Gamma3 Cine. And probably the dynamic range in A7S III is even bigger in 104,000 ISO than the Canon's native ISO. It's around 11 stops. Speaking of ISO, everybody says that it's getting a little bit better. There is no magenta angles anymore, and also here's a native ISO of 640. And also there is a second kind of a dual ISO, which is 16,000, because on 16,000 ISO it's a much cleaner picture than on 12,800. So probably it means that it's a dual ISO camera. Also in 4K 120 in 16,000 ISO, the camera gives us really nice picture quality, which we can see in Mehdi Hapoyo's video when he's shooting Daniel Schiffer. And one more important thing is about the white balance. So now we can set the white balance more easily, just simply dragging this small square and then putting it on a gray card. And also we can change the white balance during recording, which was not possible before, and it's very handy. And also I'd like to mention that those changes in white balance will be a soft and gentle touch, so you won't see some extreme steps from blue to yellow. Is it a photo camera? Yes, it's a hybrid camera, but many people said that 12 megapixels it's not enough to use it as a hybrid camera. For me, I guess I won't be using it for some photo work. I'll be shooting my family, I'll be shooting some I don't know, maybe what can I shoot for my Instagram, and it's more than enough for those types of things. But for high-end work, you simply need to buy something like R5 or maybe Sony's R4, A7 R4. So yes, it's not a photo camera, but it has really great autofocus. It has great ISO capabilities. It's very catchy, it has 10 frames per second, and if you are not planning to, print a full wallpaper, why do you want more megapixels? Also, the file sizes are pretty manageable, so for me it's a good photo camera for my personal usage. Speaking of autofocus, it's now getting much better. It's almost the best autofocus right there, right now, in this price point, and it's very catchy. The touch AF function is incredible. It has speed ramps in the beginning and in the end, so you can tap from one place to another, and it will have more natural transition from one place to another. Also, you have 7 different steps of speed of autofocus, and also you can, it's almost like magic. It catches the eye, the human eye, the animal's eye, and it's tracking really good, so it's awesome. In 120, 4K, 10-bit 422, it's also working and tracking. The screen doesn't dim, so it's awesome, I guess. I sound like a Sony boy, but who cares? If it's awesome, it's awesome. And now about the media management and the memory cards. The main question is, shall I buy the new CF Express Type A very expensive cards? No, you don't, because SDXC UHS 2 cards up to V90, they are able to record almost every single bitrate, every single resolution except for one. It's 4K 120 in all I. So it's a XAVC SI codec. All the different bitrates and codecs and bit depth, everything is possible to record simultaneously on 2 SDXC cards, but they have to be a V90 card. UHS2, that's very important. Also, I'd like to mention that if you are planning on recording simultaneously to 2 SD cards, you have to buy the exact same cards, the same amount of gigabytes and the same speed, so it won't be an issue for the camera to record simultaneously. And now about the codecs and bit rates and all that stuff. So we have a long up codec, which is XAVC-S, the same as in the previous generations of cameras, and we can record up to 4K 120 422 long up in this codec. Also, we have this ability to record to SDXC cards, this variant, this type of codec. Also, we have All-I codec, which is XAVC SI, which contains much more information. So the difference between the long-up and All-I: in long-up we have one frame, then a series of frames which are treated in the same way as the first one, and in the long-up, in the All-I we have each individual frame is treated and recorded in a full potential. So it's much easier for your computer to edit the All-I footage, and it's a little bit tougher, but it saves you some space on your memory card. If you use the long-up, it's a little tougher to computer to edit this one. And also we have the third option, which was XAVC HS, which is H.265 codec, which also eats a little less memory on your memory card, but it really brings up the pressure to your computer, because the computer is having to, you know, decode all of the information. But also the picture quality in this codec will be very nice. And now about the bit rates. In XAVC SI, so the All-I codec, in 4K 10-bit 422 120 FPS, where not 120, 60 actually 50 FPS, we're going to have 500 megabits per second, which is pretty nice. And in the long-up version, so XAVC S codec, we're about to have 200 megabits per second, which is even smaller, but it's still 4K 422 10-bit. Just a little bit less bitrate, a little bit less information. And also in XAVC HS, we're going to have the same picture quality as in All-I, but the file size will be as in the long-up version, so 200 megabits per second, which is also pretty awesome. And there is a thing that the only mode in which you desperately need CF Express Type A cards is this one, 4K 120p All-I, and it will be able only in S&Q mode, so without sound. And that's the only regime in which you need the new cards. So I guess SDXC UHS-2 V90 is more than enough, and they're not very, expensive. It's around, I don't know, maybe 80 bucks for 64 gigs. Approximately, so it's pretty affordable. And now about the IBIS. The IBIS is not, enormously and outstandingly great, but it works better than in the previous cameras. All of the reviewers said that. Also, it has the active mode, which is working even better. So right now it crops 1.1 times and you get much better result. For me, it's not an issue because in my A7S II I had no issues using it handheld. It was pretty good, so if I'm getting an even better result, for me it's okay. So you can decide by yourself. You can stick to GH5's IBIS or to Canon R5's. It's up to you guys, but I'm more than satisfied with this. And now about the rear LCD and the viewfinder. The rear LCD became a little bit better than in the previous generations, and now it's not dimming anymore, so you can record in the highest frame rate possible, the highest bit depth and bit rate, and it's still not dimming, which was very annoying in the previous generation. And now it's fully touch screen, so the menus are the touch screen, the touch to focus is touch screen, you can scroll down your footage with the touch screen. So it's a pretty decent LCD display. Also, it can be rotated, it's a flippy screen, which is also good, and the microphone input doesn't interrupt your screen, it's a little bit up, so it's also pretty good. And in terms of the EVF, everybody is, screaming out that it's the best EVF they've used. You can use it in 120p, you can adjust the quality, it can be standard or high. My tip of advice is to set it on high and leave it there, so it's a pretty great viewfinder if you love to use it. And also about the screen, that it's not the best one on the market, but I guess if you're buying A7S III, you probably already have your external monitor or your recorder, or you're planning on buying the recorder to record RAW from the A7S III, which is 16-bit RAW output, so probably it's not an issue. And now about the menu system, it became much better. It now has the vertical structure, you can see it properly, it's okay. The names are pretty confusing sometimes, but it's much better than before. It's fully touchscreen, as I said before, and also here is the user menu, which is on top of the list, so it's very useful. Everything is customizable. You can customize almost every button on the camera and the function menu. The function menu is touchscreen available, so you can touch in this menu and change your settings like your audio levels and all that stuff, which is also awesome. And one more thing about the menu system, it's not actually about the menu system, but it is there. So right now when you switch between modes, the video mode and the photo mode, you can choose several options that are not going to stick during changing. So for instance, you shoot in S-Log during video, and then you shoot photos, and the JPEGs are all gray, and you know how the S-Log looks. So now you can choose that when you change it back to the photo mode, it sticks, for instance, to PP off, neutral color profile, and you can select almost any setting and it will stick to this settings, which is also pretty great. And now about the HDMI and USB Type-C. So HDMI brings out 16-bit RAW up to 60 frames per second in the future. Right now Atomos Ninja 5 almost ready to be able to record ProRes RAW 12-bit in 4:3 aspect ratio, so the sensor is a little bit bigger because it takes 4:3 pictures, and you will have some more room in this recording mode. Also, through USB Type-C, you can make your camera charge with power delivery without losing the juice from the battery. Also, you can use the Ethernet to USB Type-C connection and plug in the camera, and you can use, for instance, a NAS to send the photos and even video right now immediately to the internet and to the server, so the editors will have the material as soon as possible and they will be able to edit it as fast as possible. And also it's good for backup, and all this functionality is pretty outstanding. And the last thing that I'd like to talk about is the MI SHOE, which is great because it accepts the special microphone from Sony without wires. Also, it accepts the XLR adapter, which is having 2 full XLR inputs and 1 stereo jack input, so you can record up to 4 channels, not 6 channels as I said in the previous video. Here's the link, you can also check this out, but 4 channels in 24-bit audio, which makes this camera almost great for documentary filmmaking. Why not? So all in all, after watching for more than 3 hours of reviews and for more than 20 videos, I'd like to say that Sony a7s III is going to be an outstanding camera, and I really want to buy this one. I'm not saying that it's the perfect camera. There is nothing perfect in this world, and many people are going to hate this camera because of some things, and some people are sticking to Canon, Panasonic, Fuji, and I respect their and your opinion about it. But it's like, talking about cars. You have BMW, you have Audi, you have, I don't know, Bugatti, and all the different cars, and if we are trying to kind of tell which one is which and which one is better, probably we're never getting to a compromise. So for me, it's a great camera. I guess Sony is making their best right now, so they're competing with the monsters, and they're actually making a real monster. So in September or in October, when this camera ships to Russia, I'm going to be buying this camera and testing it out and comparing to my Sony a7s, which is a proper production camera actually. And yeah, we'll see. And we're moving on to the quote of the episode. "No man came across 2 ideal things. No man come across one," said Oscar Wilde. This means that a7s III is not a perfect camera. Nothing is perfect and ideal. So probably we have to be a little more calm about all of this hype. And now the question of the episode. So now you know all the details and aspects of Sony a7s III. So what are your thoughts about it right now? Will you buy one? So please share with us in the comment section below. Hope you enjoyed this episode, and right now it's much more clear to you about this new camera. This was Oleg Nikitin and my Tech Kitchen. Hope you guys enjoyed it and learned new stuff. See you guys in the next video. Bye.